Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph, and we will be learning today Emir Hashem Daf Chaf Daled Amid Beis. We pick up on Chaf Daled Amid Aleph. Hilchas Tzitzis Siman Yud Beis Sif Beis, 4 lines off the bottom in the Shulchan Aruch. Says the Mechaber, Hecha de Tzarich Kidei Aniva. In any of the cases that we have been discussing, where the tzitzis strings have become torn, and in order for the tzitzis to be kosher, we need to have kidei aniva. We need to have a section of the tzitzis string remaining, which is long enough to make a slip knot around the other torn strings. So heicha detzarich kidei aniva. Wherever we find ourselves in such a situation where we need a remaining piece that has the length of kidei aniva, but we have a practical issue, and that is, we know it's much easier to loop and tie a thin string than it is a thick string. Think about it just on a very practical level, in a very exaggerated case. A thin tzitzis string, it's pretty easy to make a nice tight little loop and a slip knot. Now imagine you were working with a thick rope. A thick rope, you can't bend it so tight. You need a much bigger section to be able to loop over, get through the hole, make a slip knot. So therefore, says the Mechaber, if you have a situation where because of the thickness of the strings, you cannot make the slip knot. But if a string of the same length would be thin, you would be able to make the loop. Kosher, that tzitzis is kosher. So basically, what the Mechaber is saying is like this. The shear of kidei aniva is a length of string. It's not a shear that you have to physically be able to make the loop. It's a fixed shear of a length of string. So if the length that you have is long enough that if it was a thin string you would be able to make the slip knot, that's called kidei aniva. Even if practically you can't do it because the string is too thick, it doesn't matter. Says the Ramah, Haggah, u'misharin b'chutin beinanim, and this is divrei atzmai. The Ramah says, based on his own seichel, the Ramah says, how do we measure? I have a string and I'm struggling to make a loop. How do I know if that's really a kidei aniva or not? So, explains the Ramah, we go based on a string that's, so to speak, a beinani, an average size string. That's how we measure. Okay. Siv Gimel. No, there's a Mishnah Berurah here. Ice cotton Yud Beis. Kosher. This string is kosher. It's considered kidei aniva. Why? The haruchin hein b'kidei aniva, because it has the proper length of kidei aniva. Just practically, you can't turn it into a bow. Rak b'bnei oivi eni yachalanoiv. Siv Gimel. 2 lines from the bottom. Kidei aniva. This measurement of kidei aniva, there's a very basic question that comes up when we discuss this length of kidei aniva, and that is, where do we measure the kidei aniva from? In all of our discussions so far over the last several days, we have always assumed that we measure the remaining tzitzis string from where it exits the last set of double dots at the end of the gedil, at the end of the braided section of the tzitzits, and where it becomes loose strings. So at the area where it becomes loose strings, we need a section of kidei aniva left after the gedil. Says the Mechaber, actually, this is really a machlokes rishonim. Says the Mechaber, kidei aniva, this measurement of kidei aniva, l'Rashi, according to Shitas Rashi, min ha'onof, it is exactly the way we have said it. You measure the string that's remaining after the gedil, the part of the string that's on the anaf, that's the loose strings. Ulri, but according to the Shitas Hari, afilu nechtach kol ha'onof, even if all of the loose strings have become entirely severed. So all you have is the Gedil. And maybe even within the Gedil itself, a string became severed. But within the Gedil, you still have attached to the tzitzits a length of string that if you would untie the Gedil, that string would have Kedei Aniva. According to the Ri, that's enough. Or the Ri, afilu nechtach kol ha'anaf, v'lo nishar Kedei Aniva elim in Agdil, so that you only have this measurement of Kedei Aniva within the Gedil itself. Kosher, it's still kosher. Says the Mechaber Minig Olam Karashi, the Welt Fertzach like Shitas Rashi, which is a chumrah. You have to have the Kedei Aniva in the loose strings. But Vehecha Deloy Efsher, if you have no choice, and the Mishnah Berurah will explain what that means, Vehecha Deloy Efsher Yesh Lismay Chalri, in pressing circumstances where there is no other option, you could rely on the Shitas Hari, and as long as you have Kedei Aniva within the Gedil, it's enough. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting Yud Gimel. Yesh lismaich al ri, you could rely on the kula of the shitas hari, umutter lil b'isha beged, and you would be allowed to wear this beged of dalit kanfos with those tzitzits. Now, the Chavetz Chaim points out a very interesting inconsistency in the phraseology of the Mechaber. Over here at Sif Gimel, the Mechaber notes a machlokes Rashi and the Ri. Rashi says that the Kedei Aniva has to be the anaf in the loose strings. The Ri is Mekel. He says that the Kedei Aniva can even be within the Gdil, within the braided area. Okay, the Mechaber says, Heicha Deloy Efsher, if you have no choice, Yesh Lismach Ari, you could rely on the Ri. Now the implication of that phraseology is that really the halacha follows Rashi. The halacha follows Rashi. So really, we want to be machmir, and we want to have Kedei Aniva in the loose strings. But, says the Mechaber, Heicha Deloy Efsher, when there's no choice, Yesh Lismach Ari, we could rely on the Ri. Now, if you look back in Sif Aleph we also had a machlokes Rishonim. We had a machlokes the Rosh and the Rabbeinu Tam. The Rosh was much more makel when it came to torn tzitzits. According to the Rosh, we said, even if all the tzitzit strings were torn down to the extent where all you have left is Kedei Aniva, according to the Rosh, it's kosher. You don't have any strings that have the really proper length of Yud Beis Gudlim. The Rosh holds that b'di'evet, if the strings became torn, you don't need any strings that have Yud Beis Gudlim. As long as the strings have Kedei Aniva, it's enough. The Rabbeinu Tam was much more machmir. The Rabbeinu Tam said, you have to have at least 2 of the original 4 strings that have the overall proper length of Yud Beis Gudlim. So you have machlokes Rishonim. The Rosh is Mekel, the Rabbeinu Tam is machmir. What did the Mechaber say in Sif Aleph? The Mechaber said, V'halacha kisfaru Rishonim. The halacha follows the more kuladika opinion of the Rosh. Miu heicha de efsher, but if it's possible, toiv lachush l'sfaras Rabbeinu Tam. If it's possible, we should be machmer and we should follow Rabbeinu Tam. So in Sif Aleph, the way the Mechaber addresses the machlokes Rishonim is he says the halach is like the Mokuladik opinion. It's like the Rosh. If possible, you should be stringent like Rabbeinu Tam. Why? Because the halach is really like the Rosh. If it's possible, be machmer. In Sif Gimel, over here, we have a machlokes Rashi and the Ri. And over here, what the Mechaber says is that if it's not possible to be machmer like Rashi and have a Kedei Aniva in the Anaf, then Yesh Lismoich, we could be Soimich, we could rely on the Ri. Why? Because over here, the halacha really is like Rashi. The halacha is really like Rashi, that we need Kedei Aniva in the Anaf. If we have no choice, we can't get tzitzits any other way, then we could be Soimich on the Ri. Now with that preface, says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting Yud Gimel. Uleil b'Sif Aleph. In Sif Aleph, by the machlokes, the Rosh and the Rabbeinu Tam. The Kosav, where the Mechaber wrote, Heicha de efsher tov lachush l'sfaras Rabbeinu Tam, that when we can, if it's possible, we should follow the Shita of Rabbeinu Tam. Pirish, the explanation of that is, what does it mean if it's possible? If you could easily get tzitzits that fulfill the more stringent requirements of the Rabbeinu Tam, you should. But you don't have to go search for tzitzits that are kosher according to the Rabbeinu Tam. If they're not prepared for you, if you don't have them readily available. Or if being machber like Rabbeinu Tam is going to cost you tefillah b'tzibur because you don't have a talis that's kosher l'fi Rabbeinu Tam, you're not mechuyev to be chayshish for Rabbeinu Tam, because really the halach is like the Rosh. But for Hacha, over here in Sif Gimel, Kasav, the Mechaber uses different phraseology. Here he says, Vehecha delay efsher, when it's not possible, we could be saimach on the Ri that Kedei Aniva in the Gidil is enough. What does that mean if it's not possible? Hainu b'makom she'ein nimtzah tzitzitz klal. If we have no tzitzits at all that are kosher according to Rashi, then yeshlis b'chari. Then we could be saimach on the Ri, because the halacha really follows Rashi. It's only in desperate circumstances where there are no tzitzits available, then we'll be saimach on the Ri. But even though you could be saimach on the Ri to wear a beged of dalit kanfos with tzitzits that are kosher according to the Ri, you're not going to make a bracha. You're not going to risk a bracha levatala. V'gam also lotzis by b'shabbos l'rishos harabim. You also would not be allowed to wear those tzitzits outside of rishos harabim, because like we're going to see shortly, if those tzitzits are puzzle, then the tzitzit strings are a masui, and you're carrying in rishos harabim. Ubekazeh yesh lahachshir b'shas adchak gam b'nifsak tzas be'agdil mamish. In a shas adchak where you have no tzitzits available, you could be saimach on the Ri to wear the beged, even if within the Gdil the tzitzits are cut, as long as you have Kedei Aniva within the Gdil. In other words, don't think that when we're saying you could be saimach on the Ri, what that means is, if all the loose tzitzits were cut off, you could be saimach on the entire Gdil. No, even if within the Gdil, at some point in the Gdil, a string is cut, as long as there's Kedei Aniva of that string left, you could be saimach on the Ri. V'da, and you should know, says the Chavetz Chaim, to kol zeh, this whole discussion about relying on the Gdil, relying on the tzitzits that are within the Gdil, kol zeh einay Indian l'nifsak achut b'mkam hanekev. But this is not germane to a case where the loop of the tzitzits, where the tzitzits go through the beged, if that loop is cut, we're not discussing that. The Sham afilu l'Ri pasal min haTorah, because that's pasal min daraisa, even according to the Ri. Upashet, and similarly it's pashet, says the Chavetz Chaim, the Geshen if salam atzitzitz sarach l'pashtoi, if the tzitzits do become pasal, you must remove the tzitzits. Don't think that if you realize that your tzitzits are kosher, you could still continue to wear the tzitzis as long as you don't walk dalet amas. No, one has nothing to do with the other. You're not allowed to wear a beged of dalet kanfos if it's not properly affixed with tzitzits, even if you don't move. So there's nothing to do with walking dalet amas. If the tzitzits are puzzle, you must remove the beged of dalet kanfos, because otherwise you're being mavatal mitzvah saseh. Dein din arba amas elo lahelich b'li tzitzits. The concept of halicha of dalet amas, of walking dalet amas, where is that negea to tzitzits? That's negea to a chumrah, that we are noyeg a chumrah, that you should not walk dalet amas without wearing a beged of dalet kanfos properly affixed with tzitzits. But that has nothing to do with the requirement of the mitzvah saseh, that if you're wearing a beged dalet kanfos, it must be properly affixed with tzitzits. Even if you're sitting in a chair all day long, if you wear a beged of dalet kanfos that doesn't have tzitzits, you're being mavatal mitzvah saseh yed minut, even if you don't walk. Gam, furthermore, says the Chavetz Chaim, lo yisaken at tzitzits ba'ira talis olav. If you realize that your talis is puzzle, don't continue wearing the talis while you fix the tzitzits. You got to take the tzitzits off, because as long as you're wearing the tzitzits, you're being mavatal a mitzvah saseh. or misaknoi. Rather, you should make sure to take off the talus and fix it properly immediately. Yeah. Okay. Now we turn to Chavdal and Beis, a new Siman. Siman Yud Gimel. Dine tzitzis b'Shabbos u'boy Gimel seifim. The halachas that pertain to tzitzis specifically on Shabbos, and here we have 3 seifim. Now, we did a little bit of a hakdama to this Siman. We know that there's an Isser of Hoitzah on Shabbos. You're not allowed to transfer something from one type of Rishus to another type of Rishus on Shabbos. So you're holding something in Rishus HaYachid. You're not allowed to walk out to Rishus HaRabim carrying it. That's transferring. If you make an Akira in Rishus HaYachid, you pick something up, remove something from the Rishus HaYachid, take it out to the Rishus HaRabim, make a Hanacha, put it down, put it at rest in the Rishus HaRabim. That's an Issa Daraisa. So too, there's an Issa Daraisa. You're not allowed to carry something for 4 Amos in Rishus HaRabim. Now, why are you allowed to wear clothing? Why don't we say that you're carrying the clothing that you're wearing? Now, everybody knows that you're allowed to wear clothing outside of Rishus HaRabim. Everybody knows that you're allowed to transfer your clothing from the Rishus HaYachid to the Rishus HaRabim. But how many people have actually sat down to think about why? Precisely why is that the case? Are you not carrying? Why are you allowed to do it? Well, we gotta wear clothing. That's not the lumdus of why it's not an Isser Malacha on Shabbos. The reason you're allowed to wear clothing is because the clothing are bottle to your guf. The clothing, you wear clothing are tashmishe haguf. There's something that serves the body. Therefore, they are subservient to the body. And they are bottled to the guf. So it's not considered that you're carrying something. It's not that you're carrying a burden that is external to yourself. You're wearing something that becomes part of you. It's subservient to you. It's part of you. You're not carrying it. That's why you're allowed to wear clothing. Now, let's say you're wearing clothing that has embellishments or maybe a piece of jewelry. So you're wearing, a woman is wearing a suit and she has a brooch. She has a brooch pinned onto her garment. Or you're wearing a shirt, a man is wearing a shirt and he's wearing cufflinks. So maybe the cufflinks are a masui. Maybe you're not allowed to wear the cufflinks. You're carrying the cufflinks. Are the cufflinks subservient to the guf? The cufflinks don't serve the guf. They don't protect the guf from cold or from heat. So how come you're allowed to wear the cufflinks? How come you're allowed to wear the brooch? The answer is because now you have something that is subservient to the garment. The cufflink it fastens closed the sleeves of the garment, and it is decorative to the garment. The brooch is decorative to the garment. So now you're allowed to carry that because it's bottled to the garment. It's bottled to the beged. Now, how about if you have something that's attached to your clothing that's not bottled to you and is not bottled to the garment? Well, it depends what it is. If it's something that has its own innate chashivus. So let's say, for example, somebody has, a lot of people have keys that they attach to a belt loop or to their belt. They have a keychain that clips onto the belt. Is that subservient to the beged? It's not subservient to the beged. It's not decorative to the beged. Is it subservient to the guf? No, doesn't serve the guf. So if you want to take a key and put it on your belt loop or put it on your belt, you're not allowed to go out with that on Shabbos. That's a masui. And the reason it's a masui is, again, because it's not bottled to your guf and it's also not bottled to the beged. Okay. Now, another case. Let's say you have some loose threads or something that are hanging off your beged. Is that a masui? Do I have to make sure that I remove those loose strings before I go outside on Shabbos? No, that's also not a problem. You know why that's not a problem? That's not a problem because even though it might not be bottled to the beged and it might not be bottled to you, it's completely insignificant. It's as if it's not there. It's automatically bottled to the beged because it has no chshivas at all. Where you get into a problem is when you have something that is choshev, that's not bottled to you or to the beged, like the key. The key can't be bottled. It's very choshev. It's a key to your house, but it's not decorative, so it's not bottled to the beged and it's not bottled to you. So you run into trouble. Now, how does all of this apply to tzitzits? Obviously, you're allowed to go out on Shabbos wearing a beged of daled kanfas that has tzitzits properly affixed to it. Why? Why aren't the tzitzits a masui? The reason the tzitzits are not a masui is because the tzitzits are considered part of the beged. They're subservient to the beged. Either they're decorative to the beged, or there's something which the beged requires in order for you to be allowed to wear the beged. So proper tzitzis that are made kedasu kedin, that are made properly kahalacha, those you're allowed to go out with on Shabbos because they're subservient to the beged. But what happens if you have tzitzits that are puzzle? Now what's the halacha? Let's say you're wearing a talis and you're going outside on Shabbos, and now suddenly you realize that on one corner the tzitzits are puzzle. If the tzitzits are puzzle, then why are you allowed to wear them on Shabbos? They're no longer bottled to the beged because they're ineffective. They're also not decorative. So now that they are no longer effective, they're no longer bottled to the beged. Now you have a masui. Now you might ask, okay, maybe if they're puzzle, maybe now they're considered insignificant. And if they're insignificant, maybe they're bottle legamri. Maybe it's like the loose strings hanging off of a beged, where I said that it's bottle legamri because it has no significance. By tzitzits, that doesn't work. You know why? Tell you why. Let's say you're wearing a talis, and the tzitzits on one corner became totally puzzle. You want to argue that those tzitzits maybe are completely insignificant? So we'll see. In certain cases, maybe you could make that argument. But how about the tzitzits on the other three corners? The tzitzits on the other three corners are not insignificant. And I'll prove to you that they're not insignificant. Are you going to remove them? No. What you're going to do is you're going to fix the tzitzits on the fourth corner so that the talis is once again kosher. But you're not going to take off the tzitzits off the other three corners. So clearly, the tzitzit strings on the other three corners are not insignificant. They're very significant. But they're also not bottled to the beged because they're not kosher. So to wear such a talis outside of Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos would be Haitzah Daraisa. You're taking out a masui. Those three tzitzits hanging on those three corners are mamash masui. And you'd be over it as a Daraisa by wearing them outside on Shabbos. If you wore them to a Carmelis, it would be an Issa D'Rabbanan. So now, with that Hakdama, let's begin Siman Yud Gimel. Siman Yud Gimel did tzitzis b'Shabbos and by Gimel Seifim. The halachas that pertain to tzitzis on Shabbos, and here we have 3 Seifim. Says the Mechaber, Arba tzitziyos ma'akvin ze es ze. The 4 tzitzits that you have on the 4 corners of your talis, they are ma'akiv ze es ze. They work against each other. They restrain, ma'akiv. They restrain each other. What does that mean? What that means is, if one of the tzitzits are puzzle, the other 3 are also ineffective. The tzitzits of one corner could render the other 3 corners ineffective, right? If you're wearing a talis, and on one corner the tzitzits become puzzle, we don't say that you are being mekayim the mitzvah of tzitzis 3/4 of the way, and therefore the other 4 corners are still kosher, and they're not a masui. No. If on one corner of your beged the tzitzits are puzzle, then you're wearing a beged of daled kanfas that is not properly affixed with tzitzits, and it's completely puzzle. And therefore the other tzitzits on the other 3 corners are a masui, and you can't wear them outside on Shabbos. Let's see it inside. Arba tzitziyot ma'akvin ze. What does that mean? Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Aleph. shekula behem mitzvah achas. The tzitzits on all four corners of the beged, they're all part of one mitzvah. Ve'em naksa lo yafilu tzitzits achas, and if you're missing even one, have a kalei hitl baklal. It's as if this four-quartered garment has no tzitzits on it. There's no value, there's zero value to the tzitzits on the other three corners, if the tzitzits on one corner is puzzle. Ubita legamri ha'asei the tzitzits. And if you walk out with this four-quartered garment that has tzitzits on three corners but not on the fourth, you're being mevatel mitzasei daraisa. Based on that, continues the Mechaber, shekol zman she'ein ba kol ha'arba, as long as you don't have tzitzits properly affixed to all four corners, eino mitzuyetzes kehilchasa. Those tzitzits are not affixed with tzitzits properly. Kalacha. Eino mitzuyetzes. It's not properly affixed with tzitzits. And if you would wear this talus outside to Rishos HaRabim on Shabbos, chayiv chatos. You'd be chayiv a chatos. It's a daraisa. Vayla kaman siman shin aleph sif lamed ches. Oh boy. Wow, I looked up that Maramokum because I wanted to see what it was, and I forgot. Give me 1 second. Bear with me for 1 second. I wrote it down. Give me 1 second. Not over there. Probably over here. Chavdalan Amud Beis. Oh, come on. All right, I'll have to find it. Oh, wait, I think I found it. You know, I told you I looked up this Maramokum, and it's something that I want to mention in the share. That's why I was careful to go look now and see the notes that I wrote to see what that Shulchan Aruch is talking about. And it's something that I already mentioned. What the Shulchan Aruch explains in Shin Aleph Sif Lamed Ches is what I told you in the Hakdama to this Siman. And that is that if the tzitzits on one corner are puzzle, then the reason the other three corners are considered a masui, and you don't say that they're insignificant strings and they're bottled to the beged, is because clearly the person is not planning on removing them from the beged. He's going to fix the fourth corner. Therefore, they're chashuv and they're not bottled. Okay, let's see Mishnah Berurah's cotton bays. L'Rishus HaRabim, the Mechaber said if you wear this talus outside into Rishus HaRabim, you would be chayav achatos because of haitzah. Says the Mechaber Chaim, or the Carmelists, if you wore them out to a Rishus Rabbanon, if you went out to a place that's not a true Rishus HaRabim, let's say it's not 16 amos wide, it's not used by 600,000 people, so it looks and feels like a Rishus HaRabim, but it's not a true Rishus HaRabim. That's a Carmelist. That's an area where Haitzah is also with the Rabbanon. Wearing this talus to a Carmelist would be this Rabbanon. V'hu adin l'chol shar pesulim, and the same thing is true. Any other way that the tzitzits are puzzle to wear it outside would be Haitzah. Kigoyin, for example, shaya habeget sasam rubai. Let's say the case of a talus cotton, where on the side, the back and the front are stitched together more than halfway of the length of the opening. So now it's not a full cornered beged anymore because the sides are considered closed. To wear such a beged affixed with tzitzits, so then the tzitzits are a masui because they're not doing anything. That beged is not chayiv in tzitzits. So why does it have these strings hanging on them? And what are they? So they're a masui. You're not allowed to wear it. Or let's say you had a beged of daled kanfus that's chayiv in tzitzits, but you put the tzitzits in the wrong place. Kigoin, lamaila mishalish etzbais. You put them more than 3 finger widths, 3 finger breadths off the bottom of the beged, so it's not considered on the knaf, it's considered on the beged. Or you put them further away from the corner than a kesher agudel. I mean, too close to the bottom, less than a kesher agudel. So now it's bitachas akonof. That's also possible. And again, the tzitzis would be considered a masu. V'chol kai gavda, or any such case. Or let's say the beged of the talis katan was too small. It wasn't a kosher talis katan. So then why does it have tzitzis on it? The tzitzis are a masui. In all of these cases, it would be usher to wear these tzitzis outside, even to a carmelis. Let's say you have, like a talis cotton, where it's closed on the side, exactly 50%. So it's 50% open, 50% closed. Over there, we said we have a suffix whether or not that beged is considered a four-cornered beged. Is it chayiv tzitzis or not? Says the Mishnah Berurah over here, to wear such a garment outside on Shabbos, he references you back to what we learned earlier, Siman Yud, Sif Katan Chav Zayin, where we said you certainly should not wear it outside. If you wear this beged that's puzzle and tzitzits outside on Shabbos, you chayiv chatos. Why? Dev masui, because it's a masui. Machmas hatzitzits hanoi sorim. The other tzitzit strings that are now no longer effective are a masui. Ve'ena betelim l'gabe beged. They're not bottled to the beged. Techute tzitzis chashivehem v'loi betile, because those tzitzit strings can't become bottled. They're significant. They're chashuv. You're leaving them on the beged. You're going to fix the beged. You're going to fix the corner that's puzzle. So these other tzitzit strings are very chashuv. They're not bottled to the beged. And even if, let's say, all the tzitzit strings on all 4 corners, they're all puzzle. So maybe now we could say that they're completely insignificant in the bottle. Says the Chavetz Chaim, no. As long as there are any of the tzitzit strings, let's say on one corner, the tzitzits are puzzle because 5 of the strings are torn off. But you still have other strings that are usable. So what are you going to do? You're going to untie it, you're going to add additional strings, and you're going to reuse it. So it's chashiv. If it's chashiv, it's not bottle. Unless all 4 of the tzitzit strings ripped, to the extent that they're just totally not usable, then theoretically they would become completely insignificant and they would be bottled to the beged. Okay, therefore, says the Chavetz Chaim, in that case, you wouldn't be mechuyev to take off the talis. But that's a very strange case. Not likely to see such a case. Siv Beis, 2 lines down in the Shulchan Aruch. If, however, a beged of daled kanfus is properly affixed with tzitzits, it's perfectly kosher, then then you are allowed to wear the beged out to Rishos Harabim. Bein talis cotton, bein talis gadol. You're allowed to wear a talis cotton on Shabbos. You're allowed to wear a talis gadol outside on Shabbos. Even nowadays when we don't have tchelos. Says the Mishnah Berurah cotton dalit muter lotzes. Even at night, you could go out to Rishos Harabim with a talis cotton. It's night, and Laila loves man tzitzits. Why do I need these funny strings hanging from my beged at night? I'm not chayiv in tzitzits. Doesn't matter. It's still not considered a masli. Why? Mishum denoihu labeged. Because since they're kosher tzitzits, and they belong there, and they're effective there during the Zman of Chiyuv, now it's considered decorative to the beged. It's something that helps the beged. And this is true even by a talis, let's say a silk talis. We had that machloikis earlier. According to the Mechaber, a silk talis is not chayiv tzitzis, only midrabanan. Only tzemer and pishtan are chayiv midaraisa. So could you go out with a silk talis that has tzitzis on it on Shabbos? Why are these funny strings hanging over there? According to the Mechaber, you don't need them. It's not chayiv tzitzis. But it is chayiv midrabanan. And therefore, you are chayiv, you're certainly chayiv in those tzitzits midrabanan. Okay, as long as there's a chiv drabanan, it's a noi beged. Veina doimel beged shechesiyei pasuach v'chesiyei sasam. The pasuk b'shachad arach le'el b'simin yud sev zayin dein yoytzim by b'shabbos. Right, the beged that's open only exactly 50%. Midrabanan, we put tzitzits on it, but that's only with Torah suffix. The hasav chiyuvi hu rak mitzad suffix, and therefore you can't wear it outside on Shabbos. Ice cutting hay. Even though nowadays we don't have tchelis, we can still go out wearing our tzitzits. Says the Mishnah Berurah, why is that? Very interesting reasoning. Because we know that the white strings and the tchelis strings are not ma'akiv. Even nowadays when we don't have tchelis, we're becoming the mitzvah of tzitzits only with white strings. How do we know that? Tiksiv, because the pasuk says, and we say it twice a day in Kriya Shema, Uri'isem oisoi. You should see it. Oisoi is lashon yochid, not lashon rabbim. Akol chada v'chada mashma. The mitzvah of a re'isem oisoi, it goes on the white strings independently, on the blue strings independently. Okay, now says the Ramah, 4 lines down, you could go out with the kosher tzitzis, kosher talis on Shabbos. Rak shelo yehemunach lo al kseifav. Just, you should not bundle the talis up and have it just draped around your neck so it's not going on the guf. Because if you wear it that way, you're not wearing it in the normal way a beged is worn. And then it's not considered a beged, and then you can't go out with it on Shabbos because it's a masui. Says the Mishnah Berurah, does lo have a takshit el masui? Because then suddenly it's not a takshit. It's not something that you're wearing as a beged, it's a burden. Because that's not the normal way to wear the talis. Miu, however, Chavetz Chaim says, in miskase roiv gufay, if the way you're wearing the talis around your neck, it's still covering roiv of your body, then he says it's okay. Sagi, that's enough. Because then it's still considered a beged. It's covering roiv of your guf. Okay, let's finish this Ramah over here. Says Ramah, 5 lines down. Umukminon letalos acheskase shu mutzuyitz kilchasei. You know what? I'm going to pause over here because this goes into a very interesting question that we're not going to have time to complete. So I'm going to stop over here a little bit early with Ois Kat and Zayin, and Mi'etzah Hashem will continue with this tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me for Liman HaTorah. Schos of Liman HaTorah should be banging against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbe Hashem should say Yeshua Sefuras Parnas and Sheduchim to all those in need, and we should be zeicher to see the B'Yas Gal Tzedek B'Meher of Yameinu. Amen. Be well.